She was wearing navy blue. That was the first thing Jack noticed, and the fact that he noticed it, the exact shade, the way it sat against her skin, the small gold earrings she had put on for someone else, was information he was not ready to have about himself. He stood in the doorway, she stood in front of the mirror. And something happened inside him that he had spent 28 years making absolutely certain would never happen. "Where exactly are you going?" he said. His voice came out controlled. It was the one thing he could still manage. She turned. She saw his face. She raised an eyebrow. "I'm going on a date," she said. Silence, the kind that had weight in it. "Who?" he said. The question arrived too fast, too sharp, too personally for a man who had always been perfectly comfortable with other people's lives being entirely their own business. She folded her arms. "Why does that matter?" He opened his mouth. He closed it. He did not have an answer, which was the problem. The specific, new, entirely unwelcome problem of a man who had spent years being the answer to every room he walked into, suddenly not having an answer to one question from one woman in a navy blue dress. He didn't know why it mattered, he only knew it did. Badly. And this is where the story begins. Not at the door, not at the end, but 2 years earlier. When Ambw first walked into his mansion with one box of belongings, and the specific, self-contained dignity of a woman who had already survived harder things than a wealthy employer's indifference, he spent 2 years calling her the maid. One evening she put on a dress for someone else, and his entire system collapsed. But there's something you need to know before any of that. Something Jack knew from the very first morning Ambw made breakfast in his kitchen, and he stayed home to eat it. Something that sat in his study in a locked drawer like a debt that never stopped accumulating interest. There was already a woman waiting to become his wife. There had been for 5 years, and she had done nothing wrong. If you're watching this right now, drop your city in the comments. I want to know where in the world this story finds you. Subscribe immediately, because the man who never fell is about to fall the hardest you've ever seen. And this time the fall nearly costs him everything. The interview lasted 14 minutes. Jack Minseok sat across from 3 candidates in his grandfather's study and processed each one with the efficiency of a man who made faster decisions than this before breakfast. The first 2 candidates recognized who he was and adjusted accordingly. The adjustment was invisible to most people. Jack was not most people. The third candidate was Ambw, 22, Nigerian. Economics student at Seoul National University on a partial scholarship. Her references described genuine regret at losing her. She answered his questions directly, without hedging toward what she thought he wanted to hear. She asked 2 of her own, about live-in boundaries and kitchen access hours, with the specific precision of someone who had thought carefully about her own requirements rather than simply trying to acquire the position. She did not look at him the way women usually looked at him. She looked at him the way she looked at the room. As information to be processed, he hired her on the spot. He told himself it was the qualifications. This was true. It was not the complete reason she moved in on a Saturday. 1 box, 1 rolling suitcase. The traveling-like quality of someone who had learned that objects were harder to move than people. Jack was not home. He had a lunch, then a dinner, then a meeting in a private room in Marpo that would appear on no calendar his accountant maintained. 3 men sat across from him. They were polite the way men were polite when they were deciding whether someone deserved politeness as a permanent condition or only a temporary one. Director Chung-pa, 61, silver-haired, the kind of composed that came from decades of practice, said, "Your grandfather has been stepping back. The field commanders are asking questions." "What kind of questions?" Jack said. "Kind about what comes next." Chung-pa held his tea. About whether his grandson understands the weight of the position he's inheriting. A pause, and about the assemblyman's situation. Kim has been asking whether the family remains committed. There it was, the thing that was always in the room before it was named. Jack kept his face neutral. "Tell him the family remains committed. He'd find that more reassuring," Chung-pa said pleasantly, with a timeline. "Seoyeon is 32, she has been patient. Patience is not infinite," Jack said. "I'll be in touch with the assemblyman directly." "Of course," Chung-pa smiled. "I simply mention it because there are men watching whether you honor the structures your father built. Keeping Assemblyman Kim's confidence is not a small thing, Minseok. It's half your political protection." He drove home at 11. The kitchen smelled different. On the counter, a plate with a cloth over it and a post-it note in handwriting he didn't recognize. "Staff dinner ran long. Leftovers if you want." He removed the cloth. "Jollof rice." He ate it standing at the counter. He thought, "This is good." He put the plate in the dishwasher. He went to bed. He did not think about Chung-pa again until morning. He did not stop thinking about the food she sang while she cleaned, not loudly, not performing it. The private quality of someone who had not fully registered there were other people in the building. A song in Yoruba, brief and clear, cut off the moment she heard his footstep in the corridor. He said nothing about it. He thought about it for the rest of the morning. His grandfather visited on a Thursday. Chairman Min, 74, impeccable posture, the specific clarity of a man who had spent decades understanding what people were actually doing versus what they said they were doing. Arrived at noon, and spent the entire lunch asking Amina questions that were ostensibly about the household and were actually about something else entirely. She answered him with the same directness she brought to everything. Chairman Min laughed twice, which was more than Jack had produced in a year. After she left the room, Chairman Min picked up his tea. "She's good, she's competent," Jack said. "That's not what I meant. The food has been consistently better, the household runs on schedule." Chairman Min held his tea. "Jack," he waited until Jack looked at him. "When she walked in just now you sat up straighter. I have good posture. You do, it's usually a conscious effort, just now it wasn't." Jack said nothing. Chairman Min set down his cup. "Chung Pa called me this morning. He said the assemblyman is growing impatient about the timeline with Seoul." He looked at his grandson steadily. "I told him you were managing it. It was not quite a question. Because the way you just sat up when she walked in is not the posture of a man who is managing his obligations cleanly." He stood. "I'll see myself out. The jollof rice was excellent, tell her." He paused at the door. "And Jack, be careful what you give Chung Pa to see. He has been looking for something to use against you for 3 years. Don't hand it to him." He left. Jack sat at the table. He thought, Chung Pa is watching. He thought, the Kim agreement is not managed. It is simply suspended. He thought, I sat up straighter. He thought, those things are connected in a way I am not ready to examine. He went to his office. He worked until midnight. He thought about all of it approximately equally. He started eating breakfast at home. He had not done this consistently in 3 years. By November it was a fixed part of his schedule which he did not examine. Amina ate at 7:20, moving with the efficient forward motion of someone managing a tight schedule. University at 8:30, home by 6, studying until 10, asleep by 11. He had learned her schedule the way you learned the layout of a room you spent time in, not deliberately, simply through proximity and attention. On a Wednesday in November his phone rang while he was eating. Park, his second, the man who had known him since they were 19 and run operational security for the family for 6 years, spoke in the clipped tone he used for things that required immediate processing. Chung Pa had 2 of our Eastern contacts reassigned without authorization. He's pulling loyalty structures toward himself. Jack set down his coffee. "When?" "Tuesday, I found out this morning. Set a meeting, not here." Jack glanced at the corridor. Amina was in the kitchen, back turned, hands occupied. "Mapo office, tonight. There's more." Park paused. "He asked about your schedule, specifically about how often you're home in the evenings, and then he asked who lives in the house." Kitchen was quiet. Amina placed a second cup of coffee beside him without comment and went back to the stove. Jack looked at the coffee. He looked at her back. He felt the weight of what that second question represented, not curiosity, not conversation. Reconnaissance. He drank the coffee. He thought, she cannot be visible to these people. He thought, she already is. She lives in this house. He thought, Chung Pa just made her visible on purpose. To see what I do when he does. Thought, I need to be more careful. He was not more careful. He was home every evening and careful had become increasingly difficult to maintain, and the coffee was always there when he sat down. His friend Park visited on a Saturday and spent dinner observing things and waiting to see if Jack brought them up. Jack did not bring anything up. At 10, as Park was leaving, he said, "The house feels different. Renovated the east wing." "That's not what I mean." Park looked at him directly. "You're home, I live here. You sleep here, there's a difference." He put on his coat. "Is there something I should know about operationally?" "No." Park studied him for a moment. "Then personally." Jack said nothing. Park said, "Jack, the Kim agreement. Chung Pa already knows you've been stalling. If he finds something in this house to explain why, something personal, he will use it, not quietly. He'll use it inside the council chambers and he'll use it with the assemblyman and he will turn whatever this is into the reason your grandfather's organization fractures." Jack held his gaze. "I know," Jack said. "Do you?" "Yes." Park put on his coat. "Then you understand what I'm not saying." He left. Jack stood in the entrance. He thought, leverage, that is the word. That is the exact, precise word for what Amina would become the moment Chung Pa understood what she meant. He went to the kitchen. She had left tea covered on the counter, still warm. He poured a cup. He thought, I should tell her what I am. He thought, I should tell her about the agreement. He thought, I should create distance until I've resolved it. He drank the tea. He did not create distance. The agreement sat in his desk drawer like something he had decided to deal with tomorrow, and tomorrow kept arriving as today, and the tea kept being warm. The gifts started in January. A Korean-Nigerian fusion cookbook. A brand of tea from a single shop in Nairobi. A knife set referenced once in passing, each without a card. She confronted him about it on a Thursday. "No, you think I can't see what you're doing," she said, equipping the kitchen. Extremely specific ways that correspond to things I have mentioned once without expecting to be heard. She held the cookbook. The tea is from one shop in Nairobi. You had it imported. They also carry it online. Jack, he looked at the kitchen. You remember everything I say, she said. Why? His phone rang. He looked at the screen. Chungpa's private line, not the number he was supposed to have, the one Jack had never given him, which meant someone inside the household had provided it. The call was 6 seconds long. He declined it, but what it meant was not 6 seconds. What it meant was, I know where you are, I know what time it is, I know you're in the kitchen, he said. I have to make a call. She stepped back from the counter. The specific, practiced neutrality of a woman resetting a wall she had briefly allowed herself to lower. He saw it happen. He saw exactly what it cost her. He answered his phone in the corridor and spoke to Park instead of Chungpa and stood at the window thinking. She is 22 years old and working 2 jobs and studying at night, and she deserves someone who can simply stand in a kitchen and answer a question without the answer being complicated by obligations she doesn't know exist. He thought, I need to end the Kim agreement. He thought, I need to tell her the truth about this house. He thought, I will do both, in the right order. Soon. He went back to the kitchen. She was gone. The agreement with Assemblyman Kim's family was 5 years old. Jack had inherited it the way he had inherited everything else, along with the organizational debt and the loyalty structures and the weight of a name that meant something specific in certain rooms of this city. Kim Si-yeon was 32, the Assemblyman's only daughter. She had studied law in London and returned to Seoul with the composed intelligence of a woman who understood precisely what the arrangement was and had decided she could work within it. She did not love Jack. She had met him 4 times over 5 years. But she had organized her future around the architecture of this agreement, and she was a woman who honored structures and expected the same in return. What Jack had not accounted for, what no one had accounted for, was that Si-yeon had begun paying attention. She had noticed, in the way intelligent people notice things they had not been looking for, that Jack's pattern had changed. He was home every evening. He had declined 3 public social events he would previously have attended. He had pushed back twice on Chungpa's requests for a timeline in ways that suggested the delays were purposeful rather than administrative. In January she hired a private researcher. Not to surveil, to understand, the researcher gave her a name. Ambw, 22, Nigerian, economics student, household staff. Si-yeon sat with that information for a week, then she called Chungpa. She did not tell him what she knew, she was too careful for that. But she asked him in the precise, measured way of a woman who understood that information was a form of currency. Whether the timeline on the agreement was genuinely under organizational review or whether there were personal factors that had not been disclosed to her, Chungpa said, That is a very good question, Si-yeon. She said, I thought so. She ended the call. She sat in her apartment in Gangnam and thought about 5 years. She thought about the specific, patient investment of a woman who had decided to build her future around a man who had never given her a single personal reason to, and had relied entirely on the architecture of an obligation to maintain the connection. She thought, I have never asked him for anything he did not owe me by the terms of the agreement. She thought, that should have told me something. She thought, I am not angry at the girl. She thought, I am angry at 5 years of believing that patience was the same as being chosen. She thought, that is not the same thing at all. She was not going to disappear quietly. But she was also not going to be weaponized by Chungpa. Whatever she decided to do, she would do it herself on her own terms, because that was the only kind of agency she had left. February was when Chungpa stopped calling and started appearing. He came to the house twice, announced in advance by Park and received in the private office on the 2nd floor with the professional courtesy of 2 men who understood each other's leverage. The first visit was about the Eastern District. The second visit was briefer and its real purpose was different. Chungpa sat across from Jack and said, The household staff, the young woman Bello. Jack kept his face neutral. What about her? Park tells me she's been with you for 9 months. Has. Unusual tenure for live-in staff. She's reliable. Chungpa looked at him with the specific attention of a man who had just confirmed something he'd already known. Of course, he said. He picked up his tea. I mention it only because the assemblyman had questions about your household arrangements. I wanted to be able to reassure him accurately. The household staff is not his business. Tell him, Chungpa said pleasantly, that you asked me to convey that. He set down his tea and stood. Jack, the assemblyman's protection covers 6 of your operational channels. If his confidence in the family's commitment to the agreement erodes, those channels don't simply become less reliable, they become hostile. He straightened his jacket. I'm sure you've done that calculation. He left. Jack sat at his desk for a long time. He thought, Chungpa has named her. He thought, he has now made her existence inside this house a document in his file. He thought that was a threat, delivered as information, which is the worst kind. He picked up the phone, he called Park. Double the household security perimeter, he said, quietly, and find out what Chungpa knows about our staff roster. I want to know how he got that name. Park said, Jack. What? A pause. You understand what this looks like from the outside? Jack said, I understand exactly what it looks like. He hung up. He thought, I need to end the Kim agreement. He thought, I need to tell her the truth. He thought, if I don't do both before Chungpa acts on what he now knows, he will do it for me. He will detonate it in the worst possible way. He went to find her. She was at the kitchen table with her economics notes spread across it, a pen in her hand, her reading glasses on. She looked up when he came in. He stood in the doorway. He thought, tell her now. He thought, if I tell her about the organization and the agreement in the same conversation, one of them will cancel the other out. He thought, she will leave. He thought, she might leave anyway. He said, you're studying late. She said, midterms. He said, do you want tea? She looked at him for a moment with the expression she sometimes had, the one that said she was measuring the distance between what he said and what he meant. She said, I can make my own tea, Jack. I know, he said. I'm asking if you want some. A pause. Yes, she said. Thank you. He made the tea wrong, which she corrected without ceremony. He sat across from her while she studied. Neither of them spoke. He thought about Chungpa using her name in his office and felt something that was not quite fear but was in the same family as it. The specific dread of a man who understands that the thing he has been protecting is now known to the people he has been protecting it from. He thought, tomorrow I will tell her. He thought, I keep saying that the night of the rain was a Thursday. He was heading back from Marpo when his driver said, Mr. Min isn't that. She was at the bus stop. Completely drenched. Holding her textbooks against her chest with the resigned dignity of someone who had decided simply to be wet. Stop the car. He was out before it had fully stopped. She saw him. You don't have to. He handed her his jacket. She was wet and he wasn't, and it was the obvious action. In the car she said, this is unnecessary. You were standing in the rain. You've noticed I forget my jacket consistently. She looked at him. The silence between them had a temperature, the kind that existed between two people who had been almost saying something to each other for months and were currently in a car where there was nowhere else to look. She said, Jack. He said, yes. She said, why do you? His phone rang, Park's emergency tone. Jack looked at the screen. He looked at Ambw. He looked at the screen. He closed his eyes for 1 second. He opened them. Chungpa's people were outside your grandfather's residence tonight, Park said. Not a coincidence. The chairman's personal security flagged it. Be there in 20 minutes. He ended the call. He said, I need to make a stop. I'm sorry. She looked at the window. Of course. She was still wearing his jacket when they reached the house. She took it off at the door and handed it back without ceremony, and their hands were close enough that not touching was its own specific kind of contact. She went inside. He got back in the car and thought, Chungpa just moved against my grandfather. He thought that is an escalation. He thought he is telling me the cost of delay. He thought I have to end the Kim agreement. I have to tell Ambw the truth. I have to do both before he takes the decision away from me. He thought I was going to tell her tonight. He thought, I keep saying that. He thought, one day she will stop being there to tell. February ended without him telling her. March arrived, and with it Sung-yi's question delivered directly and warmly. He liked her. Would she spend time with him specifically? She thought about it honestly. Sung-yi was kind. He was consistent. He had never handed her his jacket in the rain and then answered his phone. She thought about that last thought for a long moment. She said yes, which brings us back to the beginning, the navy blue dress. The gold earrings. Jack in the doorway with an expression that had no protocol. Where exactly are you going? She told him. He stood there with the expression of a man whose system had encountered something it had no response for. She picked up her purse. She said, I'll be back by 10. She walked past him. At the door she paused. You don't need to wait up. She left. He stood in the corridor for 3 minutes after the door closed. Then he went to his study. He opened his laptop. He did not work. He thought about navy blue. About small gold earrings put on for someone else. About 2 years of almost saying the thing. 2 years of phone calls and meetings, and tomorrow, and the Kim agreement sitting in his drawer accumulating weight, and Chungpa namming her in his office, and every night the study light staying on, and every night her footsteps pausing outside the door. She came home at 10:47. He heard her move through the house. He heard her stop outside the study. The pause, 3 seconds, 4. She continued to her room. He sat at his desk. I am in love with Ambw Bello. He said it out loud to the empty room. He thought, and I have a contract marriage waiting in a locked drawer. He thought, and Chungpa has her name in a file. He thought, and she just went on a date because I gave her no reason not to. He thought, I have made a significant number of errors. I need to fix them in the correct order. He thought, tomorrow. Then he thought, no, not tomorrow. Now he stood up. He sat back down. He thought, it is 11 p.m. She just came home from a date. This is not the moment for the conversation about a criminal organization and a contract marriage, he thought. Then when he thought tomorrow, first thing, he went to bed. He did not sleep. He did not do it first thing in the morning, because Chungpa called at 7 and the call lasted 90 minutes, and by the time it ended the weight of what had been said in it had changed the calculation entirely. Chungpa had said, near the end, with the specific pleasantness of a man who had decided to show one card. I understand your household has had the same domestic staff member for some time now. Unusual arrangement. The assemblyman noticed it mentioned in some paperwork. He has questions, Jack said. What kind of questions? About priorities, Chungpa said. About whether Minseok's personal life has become a factor in his organizational judgment. A pause. I told him I was sure there was nothing to it. I wanted you to know he'd asked. The call ended. Jack sat at his desk and thought, he is going to move against her directly if I don't act first. He thought, he has been patient for 3 years because patience is his weapon. He thought, he is out of patience. He thought, I need to end the Kim agreement today. I need to meet with Seoul today. I need to tell Amina the truth today. He called Park. I need to meet with Kim Seoul today if possible. Arrange it. Park was quiet. Then, Jack, if you do this now before you've told Amina anything, you're going to end the agreement and then come home and tell her about it simultaneously. She won't know the order of events. She'll hear it as one thing. I know, Jack said. I'm going to tell her first. When he looked at the clock, she had left for the university at 8. She would be home by 6. Tonight, he said. I'll tell her tonight. Set the meeting with Seoul for tomorrow morning. Right, Park said. Tonight. She came home at 6 and he was in the kitchen, 2 cups of tea already poured, the specific, prepared stillness of a man who had rehearsed this and was going to say it before the phone could ring. She came through the door and stopped. She looked at the tea. She looked at him. Sit down, he said. She sat. He said, I need to tell you something, several things. I need you to let me finish before you respond. She folded her hands on the table. All right, he said. My family's organization is not a business conglomerate. It controls territory, supply chains, and political relationships through methods that are not legal. He held her gaze. I am the heir to that organization. I have been managing its operational interests for 6 years. Every security measure in this house, every meeting I've taken that I couldn't explain, every call I've answered at the wrong moment, that is the context. Kitchen was very quiet. She said, How long have you known you were going to tell me? Since February. I kept finding reasons to delay it. Are you telling me now? Because I'm in love with you, he said. And because there is someone in my organization who has identified you by name and I'm not willing to let him use that information before you have it yourself. She held very still. There is also, he said, one more thing. I need to tell you both together because they're connected and I don't want you to hear either one from someone else. He said, there is an agreement, made by my father 5 years ago with a politician's family. A contract arrangement. A future marriage designed to consolidate political protection for the organization. Kitchen temperature dropped by several degrees. She said, with who? Kim Seoul, the assemblyman's daughter. I have met her 4 times. I have never had a relationship with her. I have been delaying formalization of the agreement for 2 years because I did not want to honor a structure my father built without my consent. She said, delaying it, ending it. I am meeting with her tomorrow morning to end it. Silence, she said. You're telling me tonight and ending it tomorrow. Not end it first and tell me after. Because I didn't want you to find out the order of events from someone else and wonder whether I ended it for you or for the organization. I wanted you to know I'm doing it because it's wrong to keep it and because I'm in love with you. The sequence matters. She looked at him for a long time. She said, Are you dangerous? My world is dangerous. I have worked to ensure that danger doesn't enter this house. That's not the same as you not being dangerous. No, it isn't. She stood up. I need to think, she said. I'm not leaving. I'm not making decisions tonight, but I need. She stopped. I need to think. She left the kitchen. He sat with the 2 cold cups of tea and thought, she's still here. She came back at 9. She stood in the doorway. She said, I have questions. Them. The person in your organization who identified me, is he a threat to me physically? Jack said, he is a threat I am managing. That is not an answer. Has not made a direct threat. He has made an implication. I took it seriously immediately. She absorbed that. The agreement with Seoul. Does she know it's ending? I told Park to arrange the meeting. She doesn't know yet, so she could find out before tomorrow. It's possible. Amina was quiet for a moment. I'm not afraid of what you are, she said. I'm afraid of being inside something I don't understand, of being managed without knowing it. She held his gaze. You almost managed me tonight. You almost made the sequence happen in the wrong order to protect me from discomfort. I want you to know I noticed. He said, You're right, I almost did. You didn't. She looked at him. She said, I ended things with Sungyi last week. He held very still. She said, I came home that night and stood outside the study for 4 minutes deciding whether to say something. Then I decided to wait and see if you would. I should have. She held his gaze. You kept answering the phone. I know, she said. Go meet with her tomorrow. Tell me how it goes when you come home. She paused. And Jack, if anything changes between now and tomorrow morning, if she finds out before you get there, if Chungpa moves, tell me, don't manage it. He said, I will. She went to her room. He sat in the kitchen until midnight thinking she is still here. He thought, tomorrow I end the agreement. He thought, then Chungpa moves. He thought, and I will deal with that too. He thought, she said, tell me. He thought, I can do that. He arrived at the Gangnam venue at 10. Seo-yeon was already there. She was wearing a grey coat. Her expression had the specific composure of a woman who had spent the past 24 hours understanding what this meeting meant. She said, you're ending the agreement. Yes, I wanted to tell you directly. She held her gloves in her lap. She was quiet for a long moment, then she said, I have known this was coming for 4 months. He said nothing. I'm not a fool, Minseok, I know what changed. She looked at him steadily. I also know I made a decision 5 years ago to build my future around a structure that required 2 people. You were always the uncertain variable. I chose to believe patience would resolve that. I'm sorry, he said. You organized your expectations around an agreement I should have ended 2 years ago. That is my failure. A genuine one. She looked at the window. Then, is she good to you? She's honest with me, he said, which is rarer than it should be. Seo-yeon was quiet again. Then she said, my father will not accept this graciously. He will go to Chungpa, and Chungpa has been building toward this for 3 years. You understand what you're choosing. She stood. She pulled on her gloves with the deliberate final quality of a woman closing a door she had been standing in front of for a very long time. She said, I want you to know I'm not angry at her. That would be misplaced. She paused. I am angry at 5 years of waiting to be chosen. That's different. And that is mine to carry, not yours. He said, you're allowed to be angry. I know. She looked at him one final time, something in her expression that was not quite forgiveness and was not quite resolution but was something adjacent to both, the expression of a woman choosing not to let someone else's failure define what she became. Tell your grandfather I said goodbye. I always liked him. She left. He drove home. He walked through the east entrance and heard voices in the sitting room, 2 voices. One was Amina's, the other was Seo-yeon's. He stopped in the corridor. She had come here. Seo-yeon's voice was measured and careful. I drove here because I thought you should hear it from me directly rather than from whoever else intends to use it. Amina said, I don't understand. Who are you? My name is Kim Seo-yeon. My father is Assemblyman Kim. A pause. I have been for 5 years in a formal contract arrangement with Jack Minseok, a future marriage. Corridor was completely silent. Amina said, he told me about the agreement. He tell you about this morning, a beat. This morning, Seo-yeon said, Jack met with me. He came to end the agreement. He told me directly before doing anything else so that I heard it from him and not from someone who wanted to use it against him. Another pause, careful, precise, every word chosen. I am telling you this because there are men in his world who are going to weaponize this. Who are going to find you and tell you a version of events that makes you doubt everything. I thought you deserved the complete picture before that happens. Jack stood in the corridor and felt something shift in his chest, the specific, unexpected weight of a woman he had failed choosing to do right by him anyway. He had underestimated her, not her intelligence, never that. He had underestimated what she was made of. He moved to the doorway. Both women turned. Amina's face did something complicated, relief and confusion, and something that hadn't settled yet into any named emotion. Seo-yeon looked at him with the composed, slightly tired expression of a woman who had just done something difficult and was ready to be done with this chapter. She said, I'll see myself out. She walked past him. At the door she paused. She said quietly to his profile, don't do what your father did, it's a small world and choices echo. She left. The sitting room was very quiet. Amina said, you ended it this morning. Before you came home, before any of this. Yes, she said, I heard the phone call last night, the assemblyman's line, you turned it face down. That was you choosing. She held his gaze. She said, what happens to your organization now? Chungpa will use the broken alliance as the opening he's been building toward. He'll pull the assemblyman's protection. There will be a formal challenge within the council. Survive it, he said, I don't know. She looked at him. She said, you did it anyway. Yes, she held his gaze. She said, why didn't you tell me about the meeting before you went? Because I wanted it to be done before I told you. I didn't want you to make any decision based on something I hadn't resolved. She said, I told you last night, don't manage it. I know, I got that wrong. She stood in the middle of the sitting room and looked at him for a long moment. Then she crossed it. She stopped in front of him. She said, the tea, the cookbook, the knives, the study light, the rain. He said, yes, she said, all of it, even with the organization and Chungpa and the agreement and everything I still don't know. He said, all of it since the first month, since a post-it note on a counter at 11 p.m. She held his gaze. She said, then come home while you deal with Chungpa, every day, don't manage me, don't protect me from information. Just come home and tell me the truth. He said, I will, she said, every day, he said, every day. Side in the city, a man named Chung Pa was receiving a call from Assemblyman Kim and beginning to move pieces that had been positioned for 3 years. The council challenge was coming. The cost of the choice made that morning was going to become fully visible. Neither of them looked away. The challenge from Chung Pa came 3 weeks later, delivered through formal organizational channels in the procedural language of a man who had spent years preparing this exact moment. He had the Assemblyman's withdrawal. He had the Eastern commanders. He had a letter arguing that Jack's broken alliance demonstrated instability of judgment, incompatible with organizational leadership. The council met on a Thursday. 12 men around the table, Chung Pa at the opposite end. Composed, patient, precise, he laid out his case without theatrics. The broken agreement, the abandoned alliance, the suggestion of a leader whose judgment had been compromised by personal entanglement. He was not melodramatic about it. He let the facts do the work, which was always the most dangerous kind of argument. When he finished, he said, "The question before the council is whether Minseok's judgment should be trusted with the position his grandfather built." Jack let the room sit with that, then he said, "The question I'd like the council to consider is different." He looked around the table, not at Chung Pa, at the others. "My father made decisions designed to preserve his position. He chose power over honesty repeatedly, and eventually he had neither. He left this organization in a state that required 3 years of repair. He held the table's attention. I am not my father. The agreement with Assemblyman Kim was my father's. It was built on the assumption that I would honor a structure I had no voice in creating. I did not honor it because I found something I valued more than a political alliance. That is a choice I made clearly and with full knowledge of this room's response." He looked at Chung Pa. "You have been building toward this for 3 years, Jack said. You have been patient. That is what you do best. But the Eastern commanders you've pulled, ask them how many of their operations ran without incident last year because of decisions I made. Ask them who managed Mapo in October. Ask them who went to Gangnam in February when the Assemblyman's people first started making threats." He looked at the table. "I didn't manage those things because I wanted this seat. I managed them because this organization is my grandfather's life's work, and I am not willing to watch Chung Pa dismantle it from the inside while appearing to defend it." Room was quiet. Chung Pa said pleasantly, "That's a compelling speech," Jack said. "It's a true one, which is different." The vote took 20 minutes. Chung Pa lost it by 3. He stood, straightened his jacket, and walked out with the composed dignity of a man who had lost a battle and was already calculating the next one. The Assemblyman's representative followed. The door closed. Chairman Min, sitting in the corner chair that was not at the table, his right as the organization's retired head, held his tea. He said, "Your father would have tried to buy the votes." Jack said, "I know." Chairman Min said, "That's why you didn't." Reason. His grandfather looked at him. "What's the other reason?" Jack said. "She asked me to tell the truth every day, even when it's expensive." Chairman Min was quiet for a long moment. He said, "Bring her to Sunday lunch." She came on a Sunday in November. She carried the plant herself, the small ceramic succulent from the window ledge, which she had moved to the residence hall in May as a test she hadn't quite admitted was a test, and had brought back in June when everything the plant represented came home with it. Chairman Min received her in the sitting room. He stood when she came in, which he did not do for most people. He said, "Ms. Bello. I've been looking forward to this." She said, "He's told me about you." "Has he?" The old man smiled. "What did he say?" She said, "That you've been watching him more carefully than he realized for a long time." Chairman Min looked at his grandson. He said, "She's precise." Jack said, "I know." Lunch was good. The rice was slightly burned because Jack had been attempting to make it, and Amina had arrived to correct his technique midway through, which resulted in rice that was technically fine and told its own story. After lunch, Chairman Min found her in the kitchen while Jack was on a call in the study. He said, "Ms. Bello." She looked at him. He said, "You are without question my favorite development of this decade." She said, "That's a very specific compliment." "I am a very specific man." He paused. "He is going to make mistakes. He has very little practice at being honest about things that matter. He will answer phones at the wrong moment and protect you from information he thinks would hurt you and get it wrong in the specific ways people get wrong when they're learning." She said, "I know. You're prepared for that." She said, "I'm prepared to tell him when he's getting it wrong." He held his tea. He said, "Good." He started to leave. He paused. "My son, his father, he loved his mother genuinely. That was never the question. The question was what he did when the love required something from him he wasn't willing to give." He looked at her. "Jack gave up an alliance, a political structure, and the cleanest path through a council challenge. He did it before you asked him to, before you would have even known to ask." She was quiet. "I'm not telling you he's earned anything," Chairman Min said. "I'm telling you what kind of man he's becoming." He set down his tea. "I wanted you to have the full information. He would give it to you eventually. I'm just faster." He went back to the sitting room. She stood in the kitchen. She thought about a post-it note on a counter at 11 p.m., about a phone turned face down on a table, about a man who had sat at the head of a room full of people who wanted him to be his father and had chosen in front of all of them to be someone different. He did it before I asked. She thought that is the thing about him. He acts before he speaks. He always has. She thought, I am going to have to teach him to speak first. She thought, I have time for that. She went to rescue the rice. He came back from his call and found her at the stove. Is it salvageable? He said. Salvaged worse. He stood beside her at the stove. Amina, she said, yes. He said, I'm going to keep getting things wrong in the specific ways that people get wrong when they have very little practice at this. I'm telling you in advance. She said, that's an improvement on your previous approach. He said, it is. She adjusted the heat. She handed him the spoon. Stir. He stirred. She said, that's the right speed. He said, you've never told me that before. She said, you've never stirred at the right speed before. Kitchen was warm. Through the corridor, Chairman Min sat in the sitting room with his tea, listening to the sound of his grandson learning, slowly, imprecisely, in the company of a woman who had enough patience for both of them and the specific, clear-eyed courage to stay inside something difficult because it was also true. He thought, there it is. He thought, I have been waiting for that sound for 12 years. He drank his tea. The kitchen was exactly the right kind of full 2 years of a post-it note. 2 years of study lights and tea and cookbooks and rain jackets and navy blue dresses, and a man who spent 2 years finding every possible way not to say the thing until the cost of silence became higher than the cost of everything else. If this story found you and stayed with you, like this video. Subscribe right now. Drop your city in the comments. Which moment broke you open? The kitchen at midnight, the rain, the earrings he watched her put on for someone else, the phone turned face down on the table. Or the vote in that room where he chose her over all of it. Tell me everything. New story next week. Same promise, impossible to stop. I'll see you there.